Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Srini here, and this is my automation channel, Selenium Automation and Java Learning with Srini. And you'll be getting a lot of useful videos here on automation, Java, and different interview questions with Java and Selenium. So let's get started with today's topic. So today we're going to look at the topic of Git introduction. As I had mentioned in my last video, that I will be starting a new playlist on Git videos, right? So this is going to be a very important playlist, guys, because nowadays DevOps is also equally important, not just the Java and Selenium. You need to know DevOps pretty much well. That is the Jenkins, Git, and also Docker and Kubernetes. So we are going to start with Git. So let's look at the introduction part in this today's session. So we are going to look at what is Git, where it is useful, right? In a real-time scenario when you're working with a project, where it is useful. I'm going to show a block diagram which may be able to make you all understand better what exactly Git is and how it works, right? And lastly, we're going to download Git from scratch. And then in the next session, I'll be showing a live demonstration of how the Git works. So let's get started. So what is Git, right? So Git is an open source tool which is used for source control management, and it's like one of the DevOps tool which we are using to control the code. So let's imagine a scenario where you're working on a real-time project, right? And it's not just one or two members. There are like multiple members working on the project, and there are multiple code configuration files which are required, right, to be maintained continuously for a long term. What happens if a particular file is common across multiple team members, right? So it would be a necessity that we should maintain the integrity of the code. It should not be disturbed. Because let's say in the next week you have to deploy the code to production environment, right? You would not have that much enough time to carry out the entire regression testing if something gets broken, right? It will be really a tough scenario for you to go back and check, okay, what was the latest working code last time when it was stable, right? It's not going to be a very good particular scenario to be in. It's going to be very difficult to handle this kind of scenario. And believe me, in real time, it will be too difficult to handle situations because there would be escalations from higher management, right, from your customers. So it's not going to be a easy scenario to be in. So what is the best practices followed in the industry is that we need to maintain source control management, right? We need to know, okay, when was a particular code being checked in, or what was the version for it. If it was version 0, this was a change made. Let's say in future I made a change, so it's version 1. Someone other person made a change, it's version 2, like that. So we maintain a kind of a commit graph which will give an idea to anyone who is working on the project as to what has happened throughout the life cycle of the particular project, right? We're just talking from a project perspective now, where and how Git is going to be useful. So, is there any other code versioning tools? Yes. So, apart from Git, we have GitHub, we have SVN. There are different tools which are there available in the market, and most of them are open source. So, we are going to focus on GitHub as one of the tool which is going to be open source and it's available for you all to download and practice with it. So now, what is Git? And the way I have explained you all on a high level, but what exactly from a practical standpoint, if you want to consider? So from a practical standpoint, it's like whatever code we are developing in a project, right? It has to be maintained with a proper version. There should be a version history of what which particular code was checked in, right? And if there is any kind of a fallback mechanism we would require in future, we can just go back to the previously working node or the commit ID. Okay. Now let me show that with the example of a Git workflow diagram. So let me open Paint. This should help you all to understand what I'm trying to talk about. So let's demonstrate this with the help of a block diagram. Okay. So we have going to have three blocks here. Okay. And let me explain you what this is all about. So let's call this particular one as working directory. Okay. This is your working directory. This is going to be like a staging area. Don't worry about the terminologies, guys. So it's simple to understand. And the last one is remote repository, right? Remote repository. Okay. So let's call it either it's hosted in GitHub, let's say, for example. Okay. So let's call this a name. Let's give it a name like project IMP, project important dot git, right? So any particular project which you are having hosted in your remote repository, right? It will be having an extension of .git. So this is the representation that this is a Git repository. Okay. Now what happens if you want to take or if you want to get started on a real-time project? And let's assume that it's happening, right? You have really joined a particular company and you're joining the project and you have been asked to work on the automation side. You know the coding in Java, let's assume, right? So how is the entire process going to start now? So you would already have a kind of a repository for the project at your remote repository in GitHub, right? And only it will be restricted to those who are working for that particular organization and for that particular team because it is strictly confidential, right? So let's imagine you have got the access from your respective manager or lead and you have started working on the project. So what's the first thing which you have to do, right? That's a step one which we need to understand. So step one is going to be you need to clone the repository, right? You need to clone the repository from remote to local. So when I say from remote to local, remote means if it is hosted it on the GitHub, right? It would be available for every organization. There will be some kind of a team or a space created. It will be available in GitHub, right? So that's what we're talking about the remote repository. So local means it will be available in your local workspace, or your computer, right? Let's call this, it will be available in your computer. So when you are trying to clone a remote repository into your local, right? What happens? So it basically creates a folder called .git. It creates a folder .git. Let's assume it is created in some D drive. Let's say I have created it under Srini projects folder, right? So in this particular project, I will be having this particular repository getting stored called project imp.git because I have cloned the repository from my remote to my local machine. Now, there are certain prerequisites. You can't directly get started by cloning the repository from remote to local. You have to first, so let me mention the prerequisites here, right? So that way it is clear to you all the entire flow. The prerequisites is that you have to download JDK 1.8. Okay, I'm just going to mention all of the important prerequisites. Whenever you're working on a real-time project, you have to keep this in mind. You have to download JDK 1.8, set path variable, right? To what? So let's say it's stored under C program files. So it's stored under C program files and Java, right? Java, and you have JDK 1.8, right? And you would be having two folders. One would be bin and one would be lib, right? So you need to also set the class path variable here. So class path is going to be same path, but instead of your bin, it's going to have lib. Okay. So believe me, guys, it's very from basic. I'm trying to explain it so that it is easy for anyone who's following this video to set it up from the scratch. It should not be. My objective is that it should not take much efforts for anyone who's going to work on this particular one from scratch to be able to set it up. Right? It should be easy for you all to follow and understand. Second is a lib, right? Second thing what we require is to also download Maven because you will be mostly working on Maven projects, guys. This days all of the companies are using Mavenized projects, so you need to have Maven build tool. So you have to download Maven and set Maven home, right? Set Maven home. Yeah, one more thing is that you can also set Java home here. It's something about the JDK 1.8. This particular path we can set as the Java home in your, yeah, I'll show that as well. So you can set it up in the advanced environment variables. Okay. Yeah, so let me go back here. Okay. So you have to set Maven home. Okay, let me continue this in a new text part. Okay. So you have to set Maven home equal. So Maven would be having, let's say, under Apache. So you have to set the path for that. Similarly, once you have that Apache and all that, you have to set go till bin. You have to go till bin folder for your Apache Maven home. Okay. Then what next you have to do? You have to also download Git. This is the third prerequisite here. You have to also download Git. You have to download Git. And when I say Git means Git as well as CLI, that is command line interface, so that you can start working on Git from the command prompt. Because there are a lot of commands which are there which you can directly work with the terminal. You don't require to have a GitHub UI as always. And yeah, you can also download GitHub UI. So GitHub UI helps for those who are not much familiar with terminal and running with the commands, so they can directly use the GitHub UI to either push the code or whatever they want to do by pulling the code from the repo, right? So these are the different prerequisites which are required. Now, in this particular category now, staging area, right? Let's go further. What else is required? So once you have not staging area in general process, actually, I'm saying here. Let me call it as general process so that we don't get confused. So once you have joined the project and you have got all the prerequisites set up and you have downloaded the clone basically the repository from remote to local, what is the next step we need to do, right? So let's go on to the step two. So step two would be you would be having this particular project available in your local machine, right? And you might think, okay, let's go ahead and let's get started. It's not that simple. You have to set up a GitHub account. Okay, you have to set up a GitHub account. So this is actually again another prerequisite, I would say, and it's not here. Let me put it up here as a fourth pointer. I don't have much space below. So you have to set up a GitHub account, even though you might be a valid user in GitHub. You might be having a personal account, but when you're joining a project and a team in an organization, you need to have a set up a GitHub account for that particular organization, right? With that email address. So set up a GitHub account, and also the most important part is set up personal access token. So guys, it's been some time now that since a couple of years that GitHub has made a change in their process, so we can't no longer use the username and password which we are using for GitHub. We have to create a personal access token. So instead of your password, when it prompts you to enter the password in the command terminal, you have to enter the personal access token. So that's the fourth important prerequisite. So assume you have done all of these correctly, then it's well and good. Let's go ahead in the step two, right? So what happens here? So in step two, what you have to do, you have already got the repository from your remote to your local. You have to open the project from wherever it is saved. Open the project in your IDE. Now this can be any IDE. It may be Eclipse, it could be IntelliJ, right? Whichever you might be using, or it could be NetBeans. So open the project in your IDE, build the project. This is most important, guys, because if the project is a Maven project, you have to build the project. That is MVN clean install, and this will download all your dependencies or artifacts, let's say, into your local .m2 folder. So there is a .m2 folder which will be under your C drive and your users, and let's say your name is Srini, for example. It will be inside this particular path. This .m2 folder would be getting created, and along with settings.xml. Okay, this will be getting created. So this is very important to understand, and all of the projects these days are Maven projects. So this is very important, guys. Okay. So this is about the general process which we follow. And once, let's say, a project is built and the dependencies are being downloaded, yeah, for this one, important part is you should have a good active, good Wi-Fi connection as well as VPN connection. Because I'm assuming you all are referring this video with respect to knowing how it works in a real-time scenario when you're working in an organization. So this is important, guys, to understand that we have to have VPN connected so that you can get many of the artifacts downloaded without any hassle, right? And once that is done, yeah, you have tried to do ambient clean install, everything is successful, then you're good to go. Yeah, now what is the next step? We would be making some changes, right? Let me just try to expand this. Yeah, let me just write it down here. So we will make some changes, right? But is it about directly we'll make some changes? What is it about, right? We don't know what project, how it works, etc. So this is where entire Git process starts. In detail, it starts. So this is not even started. Whatever we have seen till now was just the basic setup. It has not even started, right? So this is what I'm going to explain now, the entire Git process from scratch. Okay, so let me do one. Let me ensure that don't lose this content. So I'll put it somewhere here, right? And yeah, let me just try to make it captured here. So that in one block diagram, you will have a full understanding of what how exactly it works, right? So this is the overall process step three, which we had. Now, what all different concepts and terminologies we are having for Git? Let's try to have a look, right? So, what are things we're going to have in Git? So, we are going to have some more terminologies to be discussed. Okay. So, we would have terminologies like remote repository, right? We will have local repository. So, I'm talking about all the different terminologies. You would have branch, concept of a branch. In branch, you will have something like master or main branch. Then you would come across terminologies like push, pull, fetch, right? So I'm going to explain you all these all terminologies, so don't worry. Then commit, then staging area. Yeah, I'm just talking about all the things which are important for you all to know the terminologies. Working directory, right? So let's get started first with these terminologies, and then once I'm done explaining with these terminologies, I will stop for the day, and I'll continue the next session, which will be a continuation and actual demo part of the Git, right? So what is a remote repository? Remote repository is nothing but where your actual projects are hosted in the cloud, right? Where exactly your projects are present in the GitHub. So that particular location or the path where your project is getting stored, which is having a .git extension, is what we call as a remote repository. Now, once you clone a remote repository project into your local, right, this particular general process, step number one, what happens here is we then call it as a, once we have cloned it, right, then we call it as a local repository. So once you've done the cloning part, we mention it as a local repository, means it is available in your local workspace. So when you're trying to work with IntelliJ or Eclipse, right, for the matter, you have already cloned the project into your local. So whatever changes you would be making to this particular project would be only your local copy. Think of this way, it's only going to be a local copy. It's not going to impact anyone else outside because you have not done any changes to push it to the remote repository. So unless and until you do some changes and push it as well to the remote, it's not going to have any impact to other members of your team or to anyone from the different works location, right? They would not be impacted here because you are just working on your local copy. That is a local repository. What is a branch? So every code or every project, let's say, would be hosted on a particular branch, right? That branch is going to be like what I would say is your like a working area or the current pointed to. Let's say this way, right? Whenever we are trying to work on any particular thing, you would want to have the main copy or the master copy, right? That okay, this particular thing should not be touched unless and until we are completely sure that this is the right thing to do. So like that, think of like a pointer that we need to have one particular entity which tells, okay, this is going to be my stable copy and it should not be touched upon or it should not be uh, updated unless and until it is completely sure that it is correctly working, right? Like in production environment, if something gets failed, it will really make a lot of losses for the company, right? For the customer as well as for the vendor. So we don't want that to happen. So we would want to have a particular branch which is always sanity checked, maintained properly without any production bugs or anything of that sort, right? So we have a particular pointer or a branch called as master or main branch. The terminologies differ, but it's the same thing, that either we can have a master or the name is given as a main. It's just a name, right? So that will always point to the latest working version of any particular project, and those particular version is going to be used for the higher environments like production or the uh, pre-production environment. Sometimes also we use a branch fork from the master. We never touch the master or unless and until it's like a proper complete merge into our production environment. Okay. We will also come across other branch terminologies, not just master and main. So you can create your own branch. Let's say I want to make some changes into my local workspace. Let's say Srini wants to make some changes, right? So I'm going to create one branch from this branch. Let's say I'm going to make the name as Srini feature, right? Feature branch I'm trying to create. So let's say I'm working on a particular project, say, yeah, project IMP, right? So I'm going to write like this: project IMP forward slash Srini feature. This is going to be my branch name. This entire path is going to be a branch name so that for others who might be working in some other different teams would come to know, okay, this particular branch is belonging to this particular project. And this guy has created this particular branch, right? And it also is always important to always mention which functionality you're trying to do. Let's say home page issue fix. Let's say I'm trying to fix some issue. So it's always important to also mention in that project what particular that particular feature branch is trying to do. What is it trying to fix the issue, or is it trying to do some enhancement, right? So that kind of feature branch I can create of my own, forked from the main branch. What is push, right? Push means I have done some changes in my local workspace and I want to push it to my remote, right? So if I want to push it in my remote, how would I basically do, right? So I have to basically follow certain process. Okay, I have to follow certain process which I'm going to explain via this block diagram. So with that process, if I follow, I would be able to push it to my remote repository. That's what we call it about the push process, right? So let me do one thing. Before I go further, let me basically talk about some changes and then you'll be able to understand. Right? So let's say in my working directory, I have the entire project available, right? This is nothing but the project IMP, which I'm talking about. Okay, project IMP is present, and there are a lot of files inside this particular project. So there are a lot of files inside it, right? So I'm just going to mention a couple of them. So file one, right, let's expand it, file two, etc., till file n. There are a lot of projects which are there apart from the configuration files, right? So what we are going to do now? So we want to basically make some changes to, let's say, file two, which has been in the remote, but I want to make some changes local to my workspace, right? So when I make some changes to my workspace, I want to basically push from my local working directory to my staging area. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll try to use an arrow that will be better to understand. So I made some changes to file 2 and I want to push those changes to my staging area. So what is the way to basically go about and do it, right? So there are certain commands we need to follow. So I'll not go that much detail into this particular session. So let's say that I want to track the changes I did in staging area. That's what I'm just going to explain on a very high level in this session, guys, because it would really require another session for you all to understand thoroughly. So I'm just trying to say right now that track the changes which I did in the staging area. That's all. I want to keep it simple. Once I've done the changes tracked in the staging area, then it becomes easier for me to basically go one step ahead and push those changes into my remote repository. So this is where I'm talking about the terminology push here, right? I'm trying to push my changes which I have done to my remote repository, but it's not like that much directly. I need to make certain more things, right? So here is where we have to basically write commit. Okay. When we say commit means it is basically added to staging area. Okay. So this is the first step which we follow. We try to before we commit it, let me do one thing. This is like two-step process. So let me do one thing. Let me also draw one more diagram in this process arrow. We have to git add. We have to add some files. And this particular one, let me say it's git commit. Right? So these are the two things which we have to do. We have to add certain files here. Let's say I've added file 2.java, right? This is the file where I've done the changes. So I have to add it to my working directory. So this is the step git add, which is going to add to my staging area. And once it is added to my staging area, I want to finally be sure about it that I want to go ahead. Then I'll do git commit. Means I'm finally decided in my mind that I want to push my changes. So I'll do git commit. And after that, we have to write this particular command. So let's say you are trying to push it for the first time. You have to write -u origin because this branch is not created in your remote repository. So I'm just showing through a command line perspective what we need to write. We have to write the feature branch name. So let's say the feature branch name here was, yeah, there it is gone. Home page issue feature, right? Yeah. So I'm going to say project IMP home page issue feature, right? This is going to be my branch name. So I'm going to push my changes to my branch, right? So this is the three-step process which we have. We have to add the files to the staging area. We have to do a commit and then those files will be pushed to your remote repository, and that is it. This is about the process on a very high level. So don't worry about this diagram, guys, or try to take screenshots. I will be uploading these all documents as well as the few important projects inside the GitHub. I will be sharing with you all the GitHub repository link into my description. So please do follow that. And that's all for today's session. I hope this was very useful to you all. So please do follow my GitHub series, as well as I'll be creating more videos on Jenkins and Docker in future. That's it from my side, guys. So please do check out my new channel. It's Learn to Code by Srini. And in that channel, I'll be adding videos on different interview questions as well as data structures, algorithms, right? So let me show the channel once to you guys so that it will be easier for you all to locate it. So go to YouTube and you can basically look at this particular channel, Learn to Code by Srini. So let me write that. Learn. Yeah, it has opened up here, right? So just go ahead and click on the subscribe button, guys. And there is a lot of important, useful content available here. So it's work in progress. I have already added some videos on data structures course from scratch. I'll be adding the playlist on solving the data structures and algorithms, different problems being asked in interviews from Lead Code, Geeks for Geeks, Hacker, Hacker Rank, right? Different platforms are available today for the interviews to interview. So you would be getting a lot of problems and solutions in my channel. So do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications. So that's all from my side, guys. So thank